Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I'm excited. We talked last week about, or whenever these go out, on the last podcast, we talked about hearing God. And we had a great conversation about it. And this week, I want to continue the conversation, but I want to give a lot more practical how do you actually do this in your day to day? And then some things that over the years I've learned that have just made me feel grounded, comfortable with the practice myself, doing it in my day to day life, wherever I am, my car, my journal, just in my day to day life, but also comfortable doing it with other people. And that is a space that not everybody ever enters, is the space of I might practice listening to God with a friend or a partner or a group of people, a small group, a Bible study, whoever I'm in relationship with, because it's not something we've had modeled. It's not normal, but at one, it actually is normal. So if you join us in the One Circle, where we have a practicing community of people who want to go deeper in their connectivity, in their understanding of the voice of God, their understanding of themselves, and how does that play out in your real life, we create a space where you can do that. And it can be maybe a little intimidating to think about. So I hope that on this podcast, we're able to take away the intimidating part, show you what we do, talk about what we do. And I hope it's helpful for you in your regular life. And also, if you want to join us, you'll know what you're getting into. And it's not intimidating. It's actually guidelines that help it be very accessible and very easy. So we're going to have that conversation today. And I want to introduce everybody. If you are just joining us and you haven't listened to any of the other podcasts, I'm Cayce. This is Anne Marie. We work at One. Really, we're all part of the One team, and we've actually been friends for a very long time. And this is John Walt. And all three of us have been friends for a very long time. John Walt is actually, he's probably not going to like that I'm about to say this. Never mind, I won't say it, but maybe one day you will get to read a thicker version of his writing than Notes on Wisdom, and I can't wait for that. But he has Notes on Wisdom. Find him at johnwalt.com. Find us at theonejourney.com and jump into the practice. The practice of hearing God is so interesting. It's at the heart of everything we do on the One Journey, but it's not just about hearing God, which is why we aren't calling this hearing God. It's the One Journey is much more about what is it to grow and mature, really become who we are. What is it to be the fullest expression of who God made you and I to be? And there's one thing that is essential in that journey, and I do believe it is this connective place within. Connection with God unlocks all kinds of things, and it really unlocks connection with who you are. And that is the space that you get to engage other people. So connection with the world around you, your family, your friends, your purpose. And I don't mean that in a weird way. I just mean the things that you're doing in life that bring meaning to your life. All of that I do think is really predicated on a deep sense of attachment. And that can come really quickly from the practice of hearing God, because many of us have grown up not really knowing who we are, and maybe we didn't have, parents who were fully attached to us or knew how to model maturity and a way of life, a path of life that brings healing and vibrancy. Well, a shortcut is finding connection with the one who made us, the ultimate parent, God. God the Father, God the Mother, Jesus, if you want to use the word brother. But there is built into our lives a connection with spirit that will mature us, because we were made to mature in families. That's a long-winded way of saying this really matters, this thing about hearing God. And I'm saying it and making a case for it, because I think sometimes people go, well, it would be nice if I could hear God, but I don't really have time to learn that or practice that. And I don't even know if I can or if it's right. The understanding that it's essential for your maturity and unlocking who you really are is something that I will argue for a long time, just because I've experienced it and I've seen it happen for other people, that things shift quick when they slow down and tap into the place where they can hear God. And so on the last call, we really talked a lot about that. It's accessible, everybody can. These ideas that we have that God's like far off in the sky, or only the special people connect with him, or that it's hard, those are not real ideas. What's real is that you were made for communion with God. And it's as easy as breathing. And if you just want to stop this practice or stop this podcast and practice breathing deeply, you know this if you have ever meditated or done some sort of breathing practice, it's powerful. It does something. It actually brings life to you. That breath that you lean into and take even deeper will calm you. It'll take you out of an anxious state and into more of peace. That is a small form, a really important form of hearing God, because it's breath, it's spirit. Literally, the Hebrew word for breath and spirit is the same thing. So it's not inaccessible, it's right there. But as a practice, how do you do it? And how do you do it in a safe way is what I want to talk about today. So John and Anne-Marie, I don't want this to feel like a one-sided conversation. Please take notes and bring all your thoughts. But I'm going to do a little bit here, about 10 or 15 minutes, on a couple things that I found to be really, really helpful around my personal practice of hearing God, and that I've seen change it for other people to where they go, oh yeah, I can do that every day. And I do feel like these boundaries keep me safe. And what do I mean by boundaries that keep me safe? I mean, what I'm not talking about is you saying, God, I want to hear your voice, having some thoughts, and maybe they're crazy thoughts, which everybody has random crazy thoughts, and then going, God said this. I think for me, that's always the concern. Like, if I'm going to hear from God, it has been in history used and abused in weird ways when people said, well, God told me this, it means this, so therefore you should, or I'm going to do this. That's an abusive version of not only hearing God, but just of navigating life. That's not what we're talking about. So these boundaries that I'm going to give you, or just these two little teachings, will help you go, okay, here's riverbanks that help me let this flow of life flow through in a safe way. So one is thinking about the way that we process thoughts. So when you're listening for God, you want to think about the way that you already think and notice how things come to your mind. What I'm talking about beyond that is, how do you process it now? So for example, last time on the podcast, I just said the word ocean and asked you what came to your mind and how it came to your mind. I'm going to do that again in a different way. And it's just about a grocery store. So I want you just to think about a grocery store. And in this next 10 seconds, notice the way things came to your mind. You're probably picturing yourself in your mind somewhere in relation to a grocery store. There's probably not just words, but images that are coming to your mind. Like for me, I'm thinking about San Antonio, Texas, Lincoln Heights. It's almost as if I'm looking in the sky over the parking lot and looking at the sign of the local grocery store called H-E-B. I can also imagine parking my car, walking in, going down the produce section. There's a lot, because I've spent a lot of time there, that I can actually access in my mind. And I have the feeling of, I kind of don't want to be here. So I'm putting words on pictures, experiences that I've had in the past, feelings. And then if I jump to another grocery store in my mind, I'm picturing so many different things. I'm jumping to the Central Market, which is a much more lovely experience, where I actually feel really good every time I go. I want to have time to walk and look at the products and taste things. And it's a very different thing. So I say all that to say, those are thoughts. And the word I'm going to use for it, as we talk about how you process your thoughts, how you process thoughts that you have, thoughts that pop in your mind, and thoughts that you think may be God, we're going to use the word input. So these are inputs, maybe even data points, you could say. And I don't mean to make it so clinical, but if I asked John what came to your mind while you were thinking about the grocery store, if I could crack open his brain and get him to be super honest with me, and this isn't pretty innocuous about a grocery store, he's probably could make me a bullet point list that was not bullet points in his brain, but that had like images and ideas and thoughts and things that connected to other things. And that is what I want us to just kind of say right now, is all the data, all the input. Another word, if you're trying to hear God's voice. So if I was trying to hear God's voice about the grocery store, I'm still going to take what comes to mind next, not so much as this is God's literal truth, but more as input, things that came when I asked God a question. So we just collect all the input, and maybe if I have a journal, I'm just going to write it all down. But let's just pretend like my hands are catching the basket of input that just came into my brain. Another word you could use if you're hearing God is revelation. But I don't want that word to be spooky. I just mean what you get when you ask God a question. What comes? Input. If we put all that in a basket, I want us to think of it as like sorting through it now. So we've got all these things that come to mind, and things come to our minds so rapidly. So when you're trying to hear God and when you're just trying to process your own thoughts, it actually helps to put it in a little basket for a minute if you're trying to process, because we're so smart and our brains move so fast and make connections so fast that our words are much slower. Writing things down is even slower. So when you'll write it down, when you'll take a minute to say it out loud, you're really like distilling and trying to look at it. And that's really good. So that's part of the process of how you process thoughts, is looking at what's there, the input. And then what you're doing naturally, without even realizing it, is you're making interpretations. So we've got two I words. So the first step is input, wherever that may be coming from, thoughts that come to mind. We're looking at it. We're going to put it in a little basket to look at. Now we're going to realize how we are already interpreting that input, and we get to make interpretive choices. So some of those things, by default, I am going to process and interpret things a certain way because of how I grew up, the experiences that I've had, what I've been taught, all those lenses that I bring. I also have the opportunity to do some research, to go further in conversation, to get curious. But all of that could be in this second basket. So if I have the basket, now the second step of the basket would be to kind of sort through it. I'm looking at what's there and I'm making interpretations. And then the last one, the third step, would be application. So you get what you get, thoughts, and especially when you're asking Jesus a question, when you ask God a question and you then record what comes to mind, then the next step in it is to look at how you might be interpreting it or how it can be interpreted, and then to make choices and move into action and application. So you've got the input, the interpretation, and the application. Before we look at it from a hearing God perspective, I just want you to see that this is what's always happening. Like I'm hearing my son's voice over there. That the thought that comes to me through all the different inputs, my ears, my sense, my heart, I'm sensing my son is here. I'm hearing that. And I'm immediately I'm not thinking about interpreting, but I'm making interpretations. Well, he may come in here. I think that maybe I'm going to need to stop the podcast, whatever. But my brain is processing it and interpreting things. Maybe I'm projecting into the future. Oh no, he's going to knock at the door. Or maybe I don't really care. He's going to knock at the door. We can even talk about it at the podcast, whatever. So do you see how I was really quickly going through interpretation to application? What am I going to do? It's just how we think. So what we're doing in this process is slowing it down, especially in the hearing God process. So if I ask Jesus a question, Jesus, what's your favorite thing about me? The input basket is going to start to get filled as soon as I ask the question. I'm going to record what's coming to my mind, meaning I'm just going to write down those thoughts. Maybe it's feelings, maybe it's a picture, maybe it's words. And now I'm going to start to realize that I'm already interpreting it. So a good example is sometimes when you ask God a good question like that, Jesus, what's your favorite thing about me? The things that come to mind are kind of funny and not necessarily things you would think of, or maybe it's really good. So my interpretive process just automatically may be to dismiss it. But what I want to do is slow the process down and just look at it. And then what I want to do if I'm practicing hearing God is continue the conversation. And that is the key. Continue the conversation about the input that I'm getting around interpretation. And I want to get curious and ask good questions and have a good conversation, because curious questions are the way to have great conversations. around interpretation and around application. So I'm not just going to go, Jesus, what do you say? Okay, here's what I got. Well, this is what it got. This is what it means, interpretation, and this is what I'm going to do, application. Instead, I want to stay in the conversation around all three spaces. Here's what I got. Oh, interesting. I want to ask some questions and have a continued conversation. Jesus, what does that mean? Well, why are my thoughts going to this memory that I had, or why is the color purple coming to mind? That's an odd, but you get really curious in that interpretive space. And then if you're going to take action, rather than just, oh gosh, now I got to figure out how to apply what God said, stay in the path of conversation. Well, what does this look like? How does this apply to my life? If I was going to take action or do something differently today, or even just do anything at all, what would that look like? So if you'll stay in the conversation with God around what you're getting, what you think it may mean, and what you want to do, stay in that place of conversation, you're going to have a very rich conversation with God. And then here's the final piece. And this is where we get into not only personal boundaries that keep you healthy, but corporate boundaries, meaning if you share this with other people, let's do it in a healthy way. Instead of being dogmatic and saying, God said this, it means this, I'm going to do this, you're going to humble yourself and understand that your input is just one moment in time of you getting input. Your interpretation is coming with all your lenses, and your application is probably to the ability of the maturity that you have at this point. So we're going to hold it with an open hand and go, I feel like here's what I got when I asked Jesus a question. Not here's what I got. It's here's what I think God might be saying, not here's what God said. You see the difference? And then here's what it could mean. I'm having a conversation with God about it. Here's kind of what I'm getting when I ask God questions. Hear how different that is than it means this. There's a very big difference. And then here's what I'm thinking about doing. And I'm taking ownership over my actions. I'm not saying God made me do something, because that's not true. I'm saying, here's where I am in my conversation. Here's something I'm thinking about doing. And so this is not a victim mindset around hearing God. God did this. God said this. It means this. I'm going to do that, which is actually a victim, because you're going, well, you're kind of blaming God. What you want to do is own your side of the conversation. Own it in a way that allows you to be wrong. Here's what I think I got. Here's what it could mean. Here's what I might do, but I could be wrong. And I'm open to growing and learning, and I'm open to more conversation on this journey. And then you're going to share it in a way that other people could go like, man, that really sounds loving and like God. Or they could go, does that feel condemning to you at all? Or interesting, I'm curious about this. And it opens space for more conversation, more growth, more rich dialogue, not less. When you say this is how it is, and this is what I'm going to do, and this is what it means, you're actually shutting down conversation. You're shutting down relationship. You're shutting down other perspectives. And so those things, if you'll just keep it in mind that there's the input, the interpretation, the application, you want to stay in the conversation around all of them and practice conversation, and you want to hold it with an open hand. Don't be dogmatic. Use your words wisely and say you're in process. Those things keep you really safe. So when we share, because we do this a lot on our board, on our staff, in our calls that you guys are invited to on Monday, Tuesday, we practice hearing God together, and somebody will lead people through questions. You know what's coming to mind, and then you're welcome to share or not share. And you can share a little bit. You could just share one piece. But the way we ask people to share is with equanimity, meaning if there's three of us, I'm not going to dominate the conversation. I'm going to leave equal space for Anne-Marie and John to share. And then I'm not going to be dogmatic. I am going to be in process, and I'm going to be okay with being wrong, with changing, with letting God continue to show me what he's showing me, with not understanding, with being curious. I'm going to hold a space for this to just be an experience that doesn't have to be right. It's more about the growth and the understanding. And so when you do that in a group, there's some really cool things that happen, and it is different than doing it on your own. I've noticed that some people feel a lot more comfortable doing it in a group and feel like they can do it, and then I've noticed that some people don't. And I don't think there's one right way there. I think we just want to talk to both sides of that. So I'm going to stop talking. That was a lot. What was not clear? What are your thoughts? Where did your mind go? I want to hear from you guys.
I think what I would say is that all of that information is just practically really helpful. It actually does really act as guidelines. And then the more I've practiced it, they're built into the way I'm moving through hearing God. And then you also watch it happen in a community where a group of people who are practicing together also are able to lean into those things. And I remember when I first started, I had to think a lot more about that, and now I don't really even have to think about it. It just really governs the way that I move through it because it is so helpful.
Yeah. I think about how we do not think about the relationship between our minds and the
Mm.
words and the images, like because we do interpret everything. I mean, we walk through life interpreting every little thing that happens. And I always think about all the times that, you'll see somebody and it can be a look on your face or maybe something that you say that's a little bit off, and it's like all the drama in so many people's lives that comes out of just those little tiny things that get interpreted. And so I think understanding that in our relationship with God and slowing it down is a pretty powerful tool.
For sure. It's like one of the things you say, Casey, a lot is our minds are meaning makers,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's
you
so good.
know, and we're attaching meaning to everything. And just that, understanding that, I go through my life differently, realizing that I'm attaching meaning to something, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's correct,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
you know? And even just that space, stopping myself is so helpful and going, this is the meaning I'm attaching to this. And what if that's not accurate? What if it's something else,
Yeah.
is really
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because I think it's so important that we understand that our minds are just constantly trying to make meaning. That's what they're there to do, and that understanding that we're getting now out of the space of brain science to understand that our brains are just trying to keep us alive. So a lot of times they're making meaning that's more extreme than it needs to be, like will you die or not? And so sometimes our minds are overreacting. And but just understanding that even your words are an interpretive choice. Every word that you choose is already in the realm of interpretation. So when you're trying to hear from God, as soon as you are speaking about what you are getting, you're making interpretive choices, whether you realize it or not. By which words you use to describe it. And so it's like, it's not or not how do I interpret this? It's I am. I'm interpreting. So maybe I just hold it with an open hand. And I think too, the picture for me is there's not one right interpretation. It's the same concept as the Jewish rabbis have around how you look at scripture. I know I was raised, or I picked this up along the way, that there's one correct interpretation of scripture and I need to figure it out so I'm right theologically. Well, that's not even like the Hebrew Bible's way of being. The Hebrew Bible's way of being, the rabbis say there's 70 faces, and maybe I got the number wrong, to every scripture, meaning it's more like a diamond that's been cut and honed. And if you look at it, or like, like a prism, you look at it through this way and it sheds this light, and you look from this side and it does something else. And I love that. It's just something rich. And so when God speaks to you, or when you have a thought that's loving, you want to let the interpretive space be something that's actually expansive, that you can look at from different sides rather than what's the right way. No, what's the beautiful life-giving ways that this can be seen? I'm not saying there's not a wrong way, like meaning don't go kill someone. That would be a wrong interpretation. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about conversation with God and life in general, and you and I are born for expansion and beauty, not shut down cages of did I get it right or did I get it wrong? And one feeds your ego and then causes death, and the other gives you life and allows you to move and expand and be free. And so when you're hearing from God, if you can breathe, relax, and not worry about whether you're going to get it right or wrong, meaning I can look at my basket and go, that seems kind of condemning. I'm not worried that that means I'm bad that I had that thought. I'm curious. And that actually now, oh, I feel shut down. I feel like I'll never hear God's voice. Put that in the basket. That's awesome. Like when I hear people get thoughts like that, I actually get excited because what's happening is now that's a space for them to look at and interpret with God. Well, God, I'm hearing this thought that I'm never going to hear you. Is that true? And now all this expands for them because they hear God's voice go, no, you can hear me. And they hear all these different things. But if they stop because they had the thought, I'll never hear God, and they just stop the practice, they're defeated. They're like, I knew I couldn't do it. I'm not enough. I'm not connected to God. But if they'll put all those thoughts in the basket, I'm not enough. I'm not connected to God. Don't judge it. Don't overinterpret it. Don't let it tell you that you can't do it and so you're not going to do it. Don't go down the train of interpretation and application so fast. Slow it down and go, wonder what that thought's about. Maybe I'll have a conversation with God about it. Is this true? And then your interpretation starts to shift. And that's the fun space.
A mentor shared with me this years ago, this concept of holding things in tension. And I feel like as you're talking, that's the picture that I'm getting of like, we want to make things yes or no, black or white, right or wrong, instead of here's something that, so specifically with hearing God, here's something God spoke. And now I'm going to hold that intention. I'm going to ponder that. I'm going to see what comes from it. There's things I don't understand about the meaning of that yet. I might understand a lot of it, or I might understand some of it, but there's more to be understood in that. I think about like when I was on the one journey and God talked to me about loving play, and that my definition of adventure was like wrong, and that that's something I've come back to over and over again constantly, and I feel like I'm getting deeper and deeper understanding of what that one like thing that he said to me means and how that shows up in my life, and it also brings with it more freedom. And so that, I don't know, is that kind of the thought of holding
Yeah.
an intention in line with what you're saying?
I
Yeah.
was thinking the same thing. Oh, sorry, Casey.
Well, no, that's exactly it. And I think you just described really well the expansion thing. It's like adventure meant one thing for you at one time. And it's not even that it was wrong. It's just that because it needed to expand. It
Yeah.
needed to, you kind of had to let go of what you thought it was so that you could understand what it is on a whole other level. And that is the process. God's voice will do that for you.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I've loved so much about it, is that it's drawn me more into curiosity. Because what you were talking about earlier is that very often we're taught to look for certainty, and our brains
Yeah.
want certainty,
Mm-hmm.
because it makes us feel safe.
It's normal.
And so if we're always going and looking for certainty, that's going to lock us down. And actually, really him in the conversation with God, and curiosity allows it to expand, and we stay in the conversation. So I may be leaning into having a chat with God today, and I'm listening to him today. Now I just remain curious about those things, because the conclusions that I may come to, in quotes, today, if I stay open, a week from now, a month from now, 9 months from now, I may be going, oh, that's what you were saying. I was interpreting it one way then, but I've stayed curious and stayed with you in the conversation, and you just so expanded it, and then brought healing and wholeness and so many things into my life because of it.
Well, that's
Casey,
one
it
of the,
also makes me think of like the healing that I've had to get. A lot of it came from interpretation of events and things that were said to me that then compounded over years and years and years and years to shape a false sense of identity in me.
Mhm.
So it's it's like the effect of making meaning, and then the way that that shapes us over time.
Yeah,
For
absolutely. I'm
sure.
so glad you're going there because it seems simple to go, well, input, interpretation, application, but it's such a huge concept because we're doing it all the time, to understand how it's doing us, and then how we can lean in and kind of slow it down and converse with God about it. But I think about you, John, around this because just knowing you and your stories, you have done such a good job of seeking the voice of God. And I was just about to say a second ago, what y'all are talking about is the reason I know that I do and other people hear God. Not all the time, not perfectly. It's a practice I'm learning. But because of what you just said, Amory, some things that I remember that I feel like God said to me 20 years ago, one phrase, now 20 years later, it's
Yeah.
shaped my life. My understanding of it has completely changed. It means more to me now than ever. Like, so that's the voice of God. That is love. It's
Wow.
like a yeast in my life. And what I was
Mm.
going to say, John, is you've done this so well. I think about the stories you've told me about times in your life when you were seeking God's voice and he said one thing to you, and it's not only changed your life and led you to where you are now, it's changed my life because I'm like, oh wow, that one line. And I'm actually thinking about the build good things. Would you be willing to
Yeah.
tell that story? Because
Yeah.
I think that's one thing. It's like it was one line and you probably heard it a certain way that was powerful then, but now it means a whole other thing.
Totally. Before I share that, I feel like I'm seeing something for the first time just in this conversation, like realizing something. We think of asking God to show us stuff like direction in life, answers to questions, very similarly to how we ask for directions to get somewhere. Like
Mm.
we're looking for how do I X, Y, and Z, or what do I need to know in order to X, Y, and Z. But it seems like God's actually, in his conversations, he's planting seeds in us. Like it's all about, I'm going to speak something into you, and that thing is going to take root and it's going to grow. And over time, it's going to bear fruit in all these ways. And so, yeah, in my story, the short version was I was at a point in my life where I was very focused on um, the darkest places in the world. I was in Malawi. I was working with the former president while she was still president. Was really compelled by a lot of injustice that was happening in the world, and felt like that part of my calling and purpose was to spend the rest of my life going to these dark places and partnering with God, which at the time I wasn't exactly sure what that looked like, but basically letting God lead me into how would I be a solution to injustice. And um and I was on a run one day, and all this, and I was, to be honest, I was very frustrated. Like there was a ton of angst going on. The Boko Haram had just stolen 300 girls from this school in Nigeria, and I was just really, really frustrated by that whole situation, but also the fact that, like, I was like, God, what is your answer to this? Like, there's this bad thing in the world. Men of God should be showing up with like the answer from God or the solution or whatever. A lot of this is immature. I'm not trying to act like my processing of this was like super mature, but so I'm on a run, and all of a sudden God just spoke to me, and it was quiet in the sense that it was in my mind, but it might as well have been a megaphone right next to my head because it just echoed all over my heart and mind. And I end up just like going down to my knees immediately, and I'm just weeping. And what he said was, if you spend your life fighting injustice, you're honoring injustice more than you're honoring what my son did on the cross. Go and build good things. And it was like all of a sudden I go, oh my gosh, like I am compelled. The thing that's compelling me is the injustice, not Jesus. And so I cried for a while just on my knees. And I always think it's like the funniest picture because it's, you got this American guy in a Cali tank top, like on his knees, weeping on the side of the road in Malawi, which at the time was the poorest country in the world. It was just like hilarious. So, anyhow, I get up from that and I know, okay, I'm supposed to go learn how to build good things. And to your point, Casey, at that point in time, it was, how do we create solutions to essentially the world's biggest problems? Like, how do we become people that know how to solve big problems by building really good things that solve these problems? Then it moved to, okay, maybe it's not so much about us building great organizations. Maybe it's more about us building great teams of people and great cultures and all that stuff. And then and there's a lot of other iterations of this over time. And then now I'm at this place where I'm going, man, I really think building good things is just about helping people become who God created them to be, because that is the thing that if every person that becomes who God created them to be has a multi-generational ripple effect in so many people's lives. They never have to stand on a podium, you know, be on some viral video or write a book. Like, just them being that and sharing that in other people's lives creates lasting impact. And so, yeah, my definition and understanding of build good things has totally changed, but it has been the consistent theme that's carried me over the last 10 years, 11 years now. So,
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's the thing where now you could probably go, yeah, that was God's voice. But does it, I was going to say, does it even matter? I don't mean it like that. It matters, but it's like the richness of what you're talking about is, a young kid with a beautiful heart doing the best he could. And then this interaction
yeah,
with God that continued to shape your life. So it's like the question now isn't, did John actually hear from God or not? It's like, who cares? John's life has been shaped for the better in a powerful, powerful way. And that's something sacred. That's like a holy space. And I would totally say, yes, that was God. So I think there's a point where you can say that. But in
that's good.
practicing, we want to go, here's what I feel like I might be getting. And then we also want to go, I'm not going to dismiss things, because I will say, truly, I've helped thousands of people hear God's voice in groups and individually. And what happens is it's not in the input space that people struggle to hear God. It's in the interpretation and the application, because people will always get something when they ask God a question. It's that they immediately are so quick to judge it. Judgment is right there in that interpretation space as God, not God, good, not good. I don't know what that is. I'm nervous about this, whatever. Breathe and have the conversation further, because that's where you get this expansive world of it can truly change the trajectory of your life with one conversation. But it's not about the changing your life with one conversation. It's actually about the space where you are connecting with the God of the universe, which is powerful and it feels good. I have never seen anyone walk away, even if they felt like God said some maybe quote unquote hard things. If it's God speaking hard things to people, like deep conviction to change certain things, it feels so good. Every one of them will go, wow, I feel so much lighter. Oh, now that makes sense. It's like it's bringing us into our right mind. And that is the power of hearing God. I think it's less about actually hearing God and more about what actually happens, like physiologically, emotionally. It's like alignment starts to happen because we're tuning into more than just our interpretation. We're tuning into more than just my limited reality. I am opening myself to this connection that I have with the God of all. And that is sacred. That is powerful. If you say that you're practicing faith, I don't know how you do it without that. So again, that's why I'm so passionate about hearing God. It's not just like a fringe idea or a charismatic idea. No, 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 no. This is fundamental to, like, if I couldn't communicate with my mom and my dad, I would be severely hampered in my life. If I couldn't communicate with you, how the heck am I supposed to work with you? How am I supposed to have any sort of good relationship with you? Communication matters. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the relationship of communication far more than did I hear God at this one point in my life or not. But if you hear God at one point in your life, it will change you. And probably if you look back at your life at the times that you were changed, the times that really like impacted you, whether you believed in God or not, you may be able to look back and see God's voice and hand in it. And that's a really cool thing too.
Yeah.
Anne Marie. Oh, go ahead, John.
Oh, I love what you're saying because this idea of suspending judgment,
Hmm.
like was this God or was this not God? We're terrified that we might be wrong. We talked on the last episode about the hearing God chart, and it's like, okay, if we just use that as a filter and go, if it's blatantly not God, we're going to reject it. If it's in line with what we know to be true about God, we're going to accept it. But being okay with it doesn't mean that when I accept this, I go, thus saith the Lord. I'm going to go tell everyone I know, God told me X, Y, and Z. But instead, allowing that to have time to bear fruit, to then be able to look back and go, what happened with that? Because even if it isn't God, God can still use that. Like even if it was just a thought that we had, but it's in alignment with him and it's something that we plant in our lives and water and grow, like good things can come from it. But just that idea of suspending judgment. I see a lot of guys, um, I say guys just because I tend to have more time with guys, but it's like get really stuck on this. Was that God? And how do I know for sure that it was God? So having that freedom to say, let's just suspend judgment.
Yeah.
Let's see the fruit. Like
Yes.
maybe you'll know 6 months from now, maybe you won't, you know?
It is the fruit thing. And it's funny because on the first podcast we recorded, the picture that it seemed like
Oh,
God
yeah.
was bringing to your mind was of this fruit and a basket full of fruit. And that's always the thing I talk about is just look at the root and look at the fruit. And then what you said earlier about the seed versus the MapQuest map or the directions on my phone, I think that's just so rich, and it's so rich with biblical history around God using natural organic images to help us understand how all of life functions, and especially hearing God. Like the words are seeds. And and you could also hear God's voice or God's planting a seed and there's the soil's not great. There's no water for it. I think
Yeah.
I know there's that parable about that. Like it's not just all about did you hear God or not. There's so much around nurturing what you got that we could talk about.
Yeah. I took someone to a prayer appointment that had no grid for this. And then they called me this week. And this was like 6 months ago. The day of the prayer appointment, they go, this was really good. I think some really good stuff happened. And then like a week or two or a month later, they're like, I don't think anything happened. And I was like, interesting. Okay. Like you changed your mind. And then they called me and now we're at 6 months later and go, I think what happened was really powerful. And it's like, okay, like he's
Interpretation,
trying to
interpretation,
determine was
interpretation.
it good or was it not? What, you know what I mean? It's like, but here we are 6 months later and he's seeing something happened in him now. Cause it's like, so to your point about fruit, so interesting.
Yeah, and that's so us. I mean, I'll do the same thing. I can have a prayer session and I'm like, and then later something happens. I'm like, oh, it's just so human.
Yeah.
Well, and staying with it, if we land on these conclusions, I can run off into my conclusion without God. I
Yeah.
can, tiptoe through the tulips, hop through my life, take an action on this conclusion I came to without God.
Hmm.
The other of holding it loosely keeps me in the relationship. It keeps me massaging it, going back, holding it loosely. And that's in the relationship is where the maturity happens. That's where the growth actually happens and the maturity. So
Yeah.
I think I just love how it's all connected,
Hmm.
you know?
Well, and I want to also just remind us this is not just a process around hearing God. This is the thing we do. So, like, if
Yeah.
I go to a
Yeah.
talk, let's say in a church setting, say I go to church, meaning a narrow definition of that would be I went to a service, there was worship, there was an order of worship, there was scripture reading, there was a pastor who spoke. You're going to come out of that input experience and go, I didn't get anything out of it. Or, oh, that was really good. I love the music and I love the words that were shared. Regardless, you're making interpretive choices. And a lot of that's just coming through your lens and how you woke up and what you did the night before and what you're thinking about in the future. It's not actually a reflection of what really happened, even though it is a response to what really happened. So we just have to realize we're a bunch of people trying, again, to make meaning. And to your point, Amory, maybe a lot of the joy is just the journey of rich conversation around these things rather than shutting it down as good or bad. And I know we've
Mhm.
said that, but
Yeah.
I kept coming back to it because when I try to control it by like trying to get it right, like, so I mean, I know there's times I've heard God's voice, but I'm so trying to get it right on how I act about it that I lose myself because I'm terrified of getting it wrong. And maybe that's the whole thing God's trying to surface to teach me a much bigger lesson.
Yeah.
And it was never even about
Mhm.
what he was saying. It was about, oh, wow, look at how I spun out on this thing, or look at how I clung to this thing because I needed it to be something that made me feel okay. I mean, it's just all a big lesson in maturity, which is the whole point, right? I mean,
Mhm.
if we want our fruit that we're growing in the garden to mature, we want our kids to mature, and God wants us to mature. I mean, like you said, John, go build good things to you now means people coming into really who they are. I agree. And I realize like it's so not sexy. Like when you try to sell maturity, none of us really want it. Like there's something in us that we're kind of like, I do want it, but it's, I think it's going to be hard. And it is. And
Yeah.
so we have to let the wrestle be part of the conversation with God and realize that it's so worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like as we're talking, I'm just seeing all these times in my life where I felt God said something or directed me in one way or another, and then at some point in time during the low part, during the like valley of the shadow of death moment where like I'm not seeing what's happening, I don't understand, things are hard, that I've been like, I knew it. I knew it. Like I'm off on my own. He's not with, you know what I mean? But it's like I'm like, oh my gosh, we're always just like judgment, 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 judgment every step of the way, good or bad, good or bad, good or bad. Um, so yeah, I'm so guilty of that. It's hilarious.
Yeah, it's such a practice to stop doing it. And I feel like I'm a baby at it. I'm just learning. Okay, I want
Yeah.
to give us before we close just three very simple basic hearing God practices, and I want to start with one that's called locator questions. And I know that I learned this from a beautiful woman named Kelly, and I really appreciate her for teaching me this. But we use it a lot to help people when, especially when they're going, I have zero idea how I would even begin to hear God's voice, or if I do. So Amory, I would love for you to just lead us, and we'll practice it too, but lead whoever's listening through that simple thing that you can do for yourself anytime to help you locate the voice of God.
Yeah. This was really helpful for me. And so I'm just going to lead us through a series of questions and helping us identify that. One of the things that was very helpful for me was understanding the difference in, because one of the things that people get hung up on is, like we've just been talking about, is that the voice of God? How do I know that's the voice of God? And the experience of that. So if I ask the question, um, Cayce, what's your favorite ice cream?
I love mint chocolate chip.
Um, what is your favorite color?
Oh, I love colors. I
All
love
the
blue.
colors.
I love green, all of them. I really love orange now. I didn't used to like it at all. Least favorite, brown.
Okay. So where was that information coming to you?
I
Did
just
you
thought
experience
for a
it?
minute. Yeah, it was kind of heady and just, I know myself. It comes really from the past
Mm-hmm.
and my preference and
Okay.
kind of a choice, an experience plus a choice. Cause I'm like, I do like chocolate ice cream, but I'm going to pick mint chocolate.
Right. Right. Okay. So when now I want to ask the question, um, am I a child of God? Where did you experience that?
Well, it does feel really different. It's subtle, but it's kind of a big subtle shift. And it
Mm-hmm.
does feel deeper. And it feels like the best word I can use for it is like, it's not so physical, but it does feel like in my gut, this affirmation. And it came
Hmm.
pretty fast, and it was just a simple yes.
Yeah. John, how about you?
Yeah, it when you talked about you're asking Casey the color question and all that, felt like I was like running through file cabinets in the back of my brain, like
Hmm.
where's the favorite color
Yeah.
file? You know what I mean? Like, um, but it felt very like cerebral. When you asked the question from to God, it's like I felt like that came like from deep in me, like up through my chest almost. Like it
Hmm.
wasn't a me making a decision to answer a question, it was a response that was coming out of me.
Yeah. Yeah. I have the same experience as both of y'all. Y'all described it just how I would have described it. Um, Now, two more questions. Jesus, will you ever leave me? Jesus, will you ever forsake me? How about those?
Same. Deep.
Yeah, and I was kind of playing with it because just because you were leading it and it was fun too. Like immediately I felt the no, and it was in that deeper space. But then I was kind of like playing with it in my head of like
Hmm.
my voice, because I do know from a
Right.
knowledge perspective, there's scripture that says, I will never leave you or forsake you. So I was kind of almost playing with the difference between that feeling
Mm.
internally that validates and affirms that no that came so quick, and also my no of like no, no, no. And I love that because it kind of almost feels like you can feel the conversation inside of you, like I'm letting my no and what I know
Hmm.
resonate with this
Yeah.
deeper knowing. But also I want to just mention that as I sit in those questions for even a second, it does feel like something. Like it
Hmm.
feels so different than if I just go, well, I know God will never leave me, versus hearing Jesus affirm inside of me, no, there is a feeling of goodness and peace. I'm trying to
Hmm.
think of accurate words to describe it, but it feels like something. And I think
Yeah.
that's important to say because you want to notice how something feels inside of you. And
Yeah.
I feel like I shut down my feelings for so long and didn't trust them. And none of us are saying your feelings need to be in the driver's seat, but they are so important for us. And around hearing God's voice, they're so important. So just notice it when you practice these questions, what it feels like in your
Yeah.
body.
Yeah. For me, it feels like a, the informational questions, like y'all described, it feels like they're very heady. They're up in my brain. I know them. They're up here. But then when I ask those questions of, am I a child of God? Will you ever leave me? There's a resonance to them, like a reverberation.
Yeah.
And yeah, it feels different. And that was super helpful for me when I started learning
So, how you
and
might use
practicing it.
this in your car, like if you want to have a conversation with God, ground yourself first in those questions. You could
Hmm.
ask yourself anything and feel the difference. Like, what am I going to do today? What's my favorite flavor of ice cream? You can still use that one. What do I want to eat for dinner tonight? Feel that and how your mind processes that, and then just say, turn your attention to the conversation space of God who's always with you, and say, God, am I a child of God? Or Jesus, am I a child of God? And feel the difference, and then dive into your conversation, staying in the space of relational connection. Meaning, if I'm talking to Anne Marie, that's a different way of being. Like, I would ask questions at Anne Marie. Anne Marie, what are you doing today? Is different than I wonder what Anne Marie is doing today. So that's just the shift from thinking about God to actually going, Jesus, am I a child of God? Jesus, will you ever leave me or forsake me? Jesus, here's what I'm feeling. What do you think about that? Jesus, here's what's on my mind. What do you want me to know about that? You can ask any question. Let it come from this space where you're already feeling that spirit to spirit connection.
Yeah, I want to say too that these questions are super helpful, I think, especially for people who aren't sure where they are with God or even how they feel about God. Mm-hmm. To start with love. Love. You can ask love, am I a child of God? Like, check it out. It's like we talked last time about the power and the importance of accessibility. And we can start there. If you of the most loving presence you can think of, the most loving, if it's love for you, love, am I a child of God? So I just, we don't have to get stuck on, you know, because I feel especially that way for people who are exploring God and they're not quite sure what they think or how they feel or who they are in relation to God and all those questions. I think this is a great place to start.
Yeah. And I have so much compassion on people who struggle with what they think, or I'm not even to call it struggle, are honest about.
Uh-huh.
I don't feel comfortable using Jesus. And if you dig in, there's usually a reason, and it's a darn good one. I mean, this is
Yeah.
an extreme example, but like
Yeah.
the child who was raped by her father while they're praying the Lord's Prayer, Well,
Yeah.
sure, you don't want to. And there's
Yeah.
all different spectrums in there, but like this is about seeking relationship. And again, I always say this, if my kids were not connected to me and then they come and they want to talk with me and they use a different name, I don't care. I want to talk to them. They are my kids and I'm present to them because
Mm-hmm.
I'm the parent. And you are the child. Literally, am I a child of God? You get to be a child with God. And so if you want to use a name that's different than God or different than Jesus, and it's honest for you because you're seeking connection with the source of your life, your parent figure here, I guarantee you that parent's much kinder than I am. And God is not offended by you. God's not anxious about how you're coming or if you're using the right words. God is loving connection,
Mm-hmm.
literally. And and so as much as I love my kids, even more so, there's grace and space. And I want to say what you just said, Amory, is so important because I've had people come into the prayer house and go, I really do. I am in a place in my life where I want connection with God, but I don't know what I think about Jesus. It's not even I don't like Jesus or I had a bad experience in church. It's just I don't know. They're being honest. And I love the honesty. And this is a great space to actually be honest about that question. So say maybe you do say love or universe or God or whatever word is representative for you of seeking connection with creator. Creator is a great word. Say it's love, to your point. Love, am I a child of God? Yes. Maybe you bring that question. I don't know how I feel about Jesus. What do you want me to know? And listen in that space, truly in this space of spirit to spirit connection. The key is honest conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we are coming with so much baggage around what we should or shouldn't do from a faith perspective that we don't even know how to get honest. I feel disconnection. I don't know that I've ever heard your voice. Perfect place to start an honest conversation with God. I always say, ask the honest, obvious next question.
Mm-hmm.
And it may seem dumb to somebody else. Who cares? For you, the honest, obvious next question is what will take you to a place of, I mean, the way I'm picturing it is like an open field that's beautiful, like just expansion inside. And that's God calling your name.
Hello, God.
Hello, he's there. Answer. Okay,
Sorry about
so
that,
that
guys.
use that practice to ground yourself in your honest, obvious conversation, whether that's with Jesus, God, or a name that allows you to have an honest conversation. Maybe it's an honest conversation about Jesus. I don't know how I feel about this. I don't know what this is. Maybe it's an honest conversation about, I don't feel like you are loving. So I don't feel comfortable with the name
Yeah.
love, the word love. I mean, that can be a trigger for people, but
It's
just go in honest.
it just makes me think years ago a guy told me that God's the worst branded entity in the universe because of all
Sim.
of the horrible things that have been done in his name, and it's like we are um as people are very scared and with what we think we know about God or what we think is right or wrong about God, God's not, that doesn't stress him out. You know what I mean? Like, I don't believe he's sitting there going, your understanding of me is wrong. So I think however you have to come into the conversation, wherever you start, us being honest about where we are is non-threatening to him. It's only threatening to the keepers of order, to the people that have
Mm.
that have a theology that they believe is right and everything else is wrong. And if you come against it, it's threatening to them. And but being able to show up honest with God is like a place where, and being able to show up however you can show up honest is totally okay.
Curious and honest. I mean, that's like the cornerstone. And I think it's probably part of what Jesus was saying when he said, "Come like a child." And if you can't come like a child, you can't come. It's not like he's
Yeah.
saying you can't
Right.
come. It's literally like he's saying they don't worry about getting it right as much as they're like, let me in, you know, and just this purity around honesty, curiosity, playfulness, that is the way. It's not you
Yeah.
can't unless you're a child. It's literally like this is how it works.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
and he knows you can is more like you're going to get in your own way.
Mhm.
If you
Yeah.
don't come as a child, then you're going to get in your own way and
The
you won't get to
tragedy is
enjoy it.
if we let what we think we know about God keep us from God,
Mm.
it's a complete misunderstanding of who God is, who we are, and the life that we are actually
Mhm.
made for. Like, God is not something to believe about or to know about. He is an entity to be with, in relationship with.
Mhm.
I love that. And
Mhm.
even the I want to say this again. I think we've said it once before, but our language is gonna be so limited for many of you listening because we use he a lot, we use Jesus a lot. Does God have a masculine representation in the world? For sure. Does God have feminine? Yes. Is God male or female? Apparently no and yes. I mean, it's just this whole big
Yeah.
thing. Again, it's invitation into the discussion of the mystery and the experience of the mystery and this greatness. We're not trying to limit, but our words will limit.
Yeah.
My history, my perspective, my race, everything will affect the way that I talk about God, and it will look a lot like me. And so just a lot of grace for all of us. We're not trying to offend anyone. We are really just trying to have a bigger conversation, and hopefully the practical side of this opens things up for everyone. Another thing I want to do is give you the simple prayer, Jesus, quiet every voice other than yours. If you're wanting to hear God's voice, I'm not trying to say shut down your own voice, because sometimes I say this and people think, well, my voice is bad and other voices are bad. And that's just kind of the lens they're coming through. I only want to hear God's. I don't believe that. I think your voice is amazing. God made it. I think who you are, your experience is so beautiful. And watching that conversation between you and God is awesome. That's what you're going to do in conversation with God, because you're not supposed to shut down your voice. But this prayer will just help with the anxiety around all the voices. So this prayer is a really good one when you're just trying to settle things in and go, Jesus, quiet every voice other than yours. Am I a child of God? Yes. Jesus, will you ever leave me or forsake me? It's when you're trying to hone in, use those prayers. Do I think you only need to live a life from that? No, that's not realistic. That will help you learn to process your own voice and all the other voices that come at us. Again, they're not actually bad. There's something to be processed. There's learning here for us. So it's more about understanding you are connected and you can experience it.
Mhm. For
Okay,
sure.
I'm done talking, I think. Do you guys have anything else that you want to say? And we'll wrap up our part 2 of hearing God's voice.
I think
We're
I'm
No,
good.
good.
It was
we're
a great
done.
combo.
Knocked it
Yeah.
out. Now, I really love this conversation, and I'm so thankful for you guys. And I'm really thankful for the space that we have, that you guys have given me to practice hearing God's voice together. John, maybe another day we'll talk about the benefits and the drawbacks of hearing God's voice together. Because some people may just not want to do that in a group setting. And this podcast is probably a really good space for you because you don't have to do that with other people. Other times, and this is how we'll close, I just want to invite you to check out the One Circle. Other times, it's very clarifying because it's like me doing exercise. Unless I'm really good at the exercise, I'm going to do better and be more accountable in a group that tells me I'm meeting at 9 o'clock to lift weights or do yoga. Because if I do it on my own, I honestly am not going to challenge myself that much. And I like to have somebody guide me through it. That's what our time in the One Circle is. So it's a safe space to have somebody else guide you. And then the other cool thing is when you hear what Anne Marie feels like God's bringing to her mind, what John, what me, what 10 other people, you start to really hear God's voice because you're like, whoa, that's super consistent. All these people came from all these different perspectives with all these different lenses and different interpretations. And then when they all start seeking to hear God's voice, the consistency is uncanny. And so if you're like, does this work? Is this real? That is the one reason to even try it out, because you're like, wow, God sounds like something and speaks in your language, but with the same heart. And that's like somehow super affirming to me. So join us in the One Circle if you are into, if groups help you. Practice here and comment. Go on our social media. We are One San Antonio on Instagram, and we're going to expand our social media in the future, but that's a great place also to ask questions, chat, find us, and we would love to see you. So thanks for joining us, guys. Thanks, Anne Marie. Thanks, John.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Yeah.
See you guys.
Bye.